The night air carried a sharp chill as Emily Carter stepped onto the back porch, pulling her sweater tightly around her. The fields stretched out before her, dark and endless beneath the moonlight. The land had always felt peaceful, the kind of quiet that settled into your bones like a comforting lullaby. But tonight, something was different. Max was barking again. His deep, frantic barks cut through the silence, echoing across the open field behind their house. Emily's pulse quickened as she watched him. He stood stiff-legged at the edge of the property, tail rigid, ears pricked forward, his entire body locked in an unshakable focus on the empty land before him. "Max, come on, boy, it's late," she called, but he didn't move. Footsteps creaked on the porch behind her. Jake, her husband, stepped beside her, rubbing his face. His dark hair was tousled from sleep, and he let out a long sigh. "He's at it again?" Emily nodded. "Third night in a row. I don't know what's gotten into him." Jake groaned. "Probably a rabbit or something. He'll settle down." But he wasn't settling down. Max let out a deep, throaty growl and took a step forward, sniffing at the dirt. Then he started digging, paws kicking up dry soil with frantic urgency. Emily frowned. "Jake, he's never done that before." Jake muttered something under his breath and pulled on his boot. "I'll go get him. Maybe if we bring him inside, he'll stop this nonsense." As he trudged across the yard, Emily glanced back at the house, spotting their son Noah peeking through the window. His small face, framed by messy curls, held an expression of curiosity tinged with unease. She gave him a reassuring wave, then turned back just as Jake reached Max. "Come on, boy," Jake said, grabbing Max by the collar. The dog resisted, his muscles tense. He whined, low and urgent, and then barked again, short, sharp, demanding. Jake let out a frustrated breath and looked down at the spot Max had been digging. "What is it, huh? What's so damn important?" Emily crossed her arms. "Maybe we should check it out." Jake scoffed. "Check what out? It's dirt, Em. He's just fixated on something. A scent, a burrow, who knows?" Emily hesitated. The logical part of her wanted to agree, but something about Max's behavior unsettled her. He wasn't just barking, he was warning. That night, even after they finally got Max inside, she lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling while the wind whispered outside. The next morning, Noah padded into the kitchen, rubbing his sleepy eyes. "Mommy, is Max okay?" Emily poured his cereal, glancing out the window. "He's fine, honey. Why do you ask?" Noah climbed onto his chair, kicking his small feet back and forth. "I heard him crying last night." Emily's hand paused on the spoon. "He was making little sad noises," Noah continued. "Like when he got scared during the thunderstorm." Emily forced a smile. "Maybe he just had a bad dream." Noah frowned at his cereal, unconvinced. That afternoon, Max was at it again. He shot out the door the moment Emily opened it, bolting straight to the same spot, nose to the ground. Emily followed, her breath coming quicker. "Max, what is it?" His paws worked furiously, dirt flying. This wasn't normal digging. This was desperate. "Mom." Noah's voice was small. He had come outside, standing barefoot on the porch. "I had a dream last night." Emily turned, brushing strands of hair from her face. "About what, sweetheart?" Noah hesitated, his little fingers gripping the railing. "A girl." A shiver skated down Emily's spine. "What kind of girl?" Noah's eyes darted toward Max, then back to his mother. She was whispering. "She said she was cold." Emily felt her pulse throb in her throat. "She asked me to help her," Noah added. Then, almost as an afterthought, he whispered, "But I don't know how." Max let out a sharp bark, as if in answer. Emily turned back to the dog, watching as his paws struck something hard beneath the dirt. Something solid. And then, for the first time in days, Max stopped barking. Jake knelt beside Max, brushing the dirt away with tense fingers. The dog stood rigid, ears twitching, his breath coming in sharp huffs as if urging them to hurry. Emily hovered nearby, her stomach twisted in tight knots. "What is it?" she asked, but Jake didn't answer. His fingers struck something beneath the loose earth. A dull, metallic sound. Emily sucked in a breath. "Jake!" He dug faster, pushing dirt aside until the shape emerged, old, rusted, about the size of a shoebox. A lockbox. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Even Max had gone eerily silent, his eyes fixed on the object as though it carried some invisible weight. Jake exhaled sharply. "What the hell is this doing here?" Emily wiped her hands on her jeans, her mind racing. "It looks ancient." Noah, who had been watching from the porch, took a hesitant step forward. "Is it treasure?" Jake glanced at his son, then back at Emily. "Only one way to find out." His fingers curled around the rusted edges, giving the box a small tug. It barely budged. The years had buried it deep, the weight of time pressing it into the earth like a forgotten secret. Emily crouched beside him. "Maybe we should." The lock snapped. Jake jerked back, startled. He hadn't even pulled hard. It had simply given way, as if it had been waiting for them. Emily swallowed hard. Jake lifted the lid. Inside, beneath layers of dust and decay, was a bundle of faded fabric. A dress, small, delicate, meant for a child. Emily's breath hitched. And then she saw the bones. Tiny. Fragile. Curled like a sleeping child. Noah gasped. "Mommy!" Emily clapped a hand over her mouth, heart hammering. Jake's face had drained of all color. He stared down at the remains, his fingers gripping the edges of the box so tightly his knuckles turned white. Max let out a low whimper. Noah whispered, "The girl in my dream." Emily turned to him, her skin crawling. "What did you say?" Noah looked at her, his young eyes wide and unblinking. "She said she was waiting." The wind picked up, stirring the trees. Somewhere in the distance, a door creaked on rusted hinges. Emily shuddered. Jake shut the box with a snap, his movements stiff. "We need to call someone." Emily nodded, but her thoughts spun in 1,000 directions. Who had buried this child here? How long had she been waiting to be found? And why had Max been the only one who knew she was there? As she reached out to steady herself against the ground, a whisper curled through her ears, soft like a sigh. "Thank you." The breath left Emily's lungs in a rush. She turned, but there was nothing. Just the empty field, stretching out beneath the fading light. And Max, his golden eyes locked on something only he could see. The police arrived within the hour. The flashing red and blue lights cast eerie shadows across the field as officers moved carefully around the site, their voices low and tense. A forensic team began cordoning off the area, setting up floodlights that bathed the disturbed earth in a cold, artificial glow. Emily stood near the porch, arms wrapped around herself. Jake paced beside her, his jaw clenched, while Noah sat on the steps, absently running his fingers through Max's fur. The dog had not moved from his spot, his body alert, ears twitching at every sound. Detective Harris, a grizzled man with a tired expression, approached them, holding a small notepad. "You said the dog found it?" Jake nodded. "He wouldn't stop barking. Then he started digging. That's when we found the box." Harris scribbled something down. "Has he ever acted like this before?" Emily shook her head. "Never." The detective studied them for a moment, then exhaled. "The remains, they're old. Likely decade. But we'll need forensic analysis to be sure. Until then, we'll treat this as a possible homicide." Noah tugged at Emily's sleeve. "Mommy, is the girl okay now?" Emily's breath caught. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" Noah blinked up at her. "She's not whispering anymore." Harris frowned. "What girl?" Jake cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable. "Our son, he's been having dreams. About a little girl." The detective's expression darkened. "Describe her." Noah hesitated. "She had dark hair. A pretty dress." His voice softened. "She was sad." Harris's grip on his notepad tightened. "Did she say anything else?" Noah nodded slowly. "She said she was waiting." Emily felt her skin prickle. Harris exchanged a glance with one of his officers, then turned back to them. I need to ask, did you know anything about this land before you bought it? Jake shifted. It was just an old farm, abandoned for years. The house was rebuilt, but the field was left untouched. Harris inhaled deeply. There was a missing child reported in this area. Decades ago. A girl named Lillian Moore. Emily's breath hitched. She disappeared one summer night, Harris continued. Vanished without a trace. The case went cold. He tapped the notepad. If these remains are hers, then we may finally have some answers. Noah leaned closer. She was waiting for someone to find her. Harris's gaze lingered on the boy before he turned back to his team. We'll need time to confirm everything. As the officers worked, Emily felt something shift in the air, a quiet, almost imperceptible lightness. The field no longer felt so heavy, so burdened by something unseen. Max finally lay down, resting his head on his paws. For the first time in days, he seemed at peace. The days after the discovery felt surreal. Investigators combed through historical records, confirming that the remains belonged to Lillian Moore, a 6-year-old girl who vanished without a trace nearly 40 years ago. The news spread quickly, rippling through the town like a long-forgotten ghost story coming to life. Emily sat at the kitchen table, the newspaper open in front of her. The headlines sent a chill down her spine. Remains of missing child found on rural property, cold case reopened. She glanced at Noah, who was drawing at the other end of the table. He had been quieter than usual, his little brows furrowed in concentration as he sketched with deliberate strokes. Max lay curled up beside him, content but watchful. Jake walked in, setting his coffee down with a sigh. They arrested someone. Emily stiffened. Who? James Moore. Her father. Her breath caught. Her own father? Jake nodded grimly. Detective Harris said new evidence came up, things they didn't have back then. Lillian had been reported missing, but there were gaps in her parents' statements. With the remains finally found, they could test for injuries. The forensic report showed signs of trauma. Emily pressed a hand to her mouth. The weight of the truth settled heavily around her. All this time, she was here. Noah looked up from his drawing. She's not sad anymore. Jake and Emily exchanged glances. She told me, Noah continued simply, holding up his picture. It was of a little girl in a blue dress, standing in the sunshine. Beside her sat a golden retriever, tail wagging. She said, "Thank you." Emily felt tears sting her eyes. She reached for Jake's hand, gripping it tightly. Outside, the wind stirred the tall grass in the field. It no longer felt eerie or haunted, just quiet, peaceful. Max lifted his head, ears perked. For a moment, Emily could almost swear she heard laughter in the breeze, soft, like a child's giggle carried away by the wind. And then, just as quickly, it was gone.